Points of order again.
Hello and welcome to Shaka Extra Time. My name is Jackson Vunganyi, host of Upfront on the Voice of America. I'm in for Paul Ndiho, who is away on assignment. In the studio with me is the man himself, Shaka Sali. Shaka, how are you? Good to see you.
I'm hugely terrific.
So you've been away for a couple of weeks. Tell us where you've been.
That's true. I did go to Europe, in fact, to Eastern Europe, what was once Eastern Europe. Which is currently called the Czech Republic, and whose capital is Prague, which used to be the capital of what used to be Czechoslovakia.
Czechoslovakia, yes, I remember that name.
Czechoslovakia, and then you had, of course, the Soviet control, and you had this rebel in by the leader called Alexander Dubček,
yes,
who pretty much was mistreated by the Soviets, but eventually when the Soviet Union collapsed, as it were, then the Czechoslovakia at the time, especially the Czech Republic, had a hero by the name Václav Havel,
yes,
who was essentially the hero
an organizer,
of the Velvet Revolution in 1989.
Yes.
He was a playwright,
yes,
great artist, and in fact the airport in Prague is named after his name.
He was a great
in
man.
His honor. He was a great man.
I remember reading some of his works many years ago.
He was a great man,
yes,
and obviously he's credited for reintroducing democracy in that part of the world.
Yes, absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
So you had gone for work?
I had gone to moderate a panel, which was part of their week of celebrations of Africa Day, Africa Liberation Day, which is supposed to be May 25. Celebrated throughout the African continent.
Who was organizing it?
It was organized by the Czech Republic Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Interesting. Czech Republic Ministry of Foreign Affairs has an Africa Day commemoration.
They did have an Africa Day indeed, and I think it is one way of reaching out to Africa, of engaging Africa, because I think they have a lot to gain from the African continent.
Absolutely. So do many countries.
Yes, indeed. I must say that it wasn't the best of times for Shaka. I did feel a bit sickly.
I'm so sorry to hear that.
Medically challenged and stuff like that. But I was very, very lucky because I had this Mzungu who I refer to as my brother from another mother, who also happened to be on another assignment in the region. And he happened to be at the event, and you can't believe how much he helped me.
Absolutely.
Really.
Sometimes help comes from interesting, unexpected places.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, so let's dive in. We have so many questions for you, Shaka, from your listeners and your fans sent in via Facebook Live. Remember, if you have any questions for Shaka, we're answering them right here on the show in the next 30 minutes. Let's start with Sudan. Lots happening in Sudan right now. The third day of a civil disobedience campaign. The Sudan's opposition council has plans to nominate 8 members to be part of their transitional council. The military doesn't seem to be letting up. The African Union has suspended Sudan. Where do you see this going? How does this end for Sudanese who fought tooth and nail to get rid of al-Bashir? But most importantly, I guess the second part of the question is, what does this say about the African Union, an organization that we've been very critical of here on the show, including yourself, saying that it has been, turning a blind eye on the struggles of a common African man as they seek for some of their basic rights, including fighting for democratic reforms on the continent.
I'm not really surprised that the African Union has taken that kind of step, as it should. I think what remains really is what do they do next, or at least be on the side of the ordinary Sudanese people, to the extent that they come up with a solution, sincerely, that reflects justice for all, because that is what, in fact, is needed in the Sudan. This is a problem, I think, when you look at the Sudan, that is expected to happen when you have had a country that is democratically challenged, that is essentially ruled or governed by a dictator, really, for so many years. Because you had Omar Bashir in power in Khartoum for 3 decades,
right,
as it were. So you're talking about a generation, really. And you can understand why the left doesn't know where the right is, or the right doesn't know.
They become some sort of a power vacuum when this person, this figure. But do you see a goodwill on the part of the military? Do you think the military in Sudan is willing to give up power that easily?
You see, the problem is that power is something that almost nobody really wants to give up easily. They must be forced to give it up, or they must be forced to compromise, which they must do. And even on the civilian side, really, Jackson, when you think about it, they also need the military. So I think that the best solution, sincerely, would be both the military elements and the civilian opposition leadership to figure out a way of working together, because they need each other.
Right.
They should actually stay away from these pettish, parochial, selfish, individual interests,
right,
and put the interests of the country, of the people of Sudan, above and beyond everything else.
I mean, so far we've seen that the military is willing to use some sort of violence. Again, the question is, how do you push the hand of people who are willing to use violence against civilians who are peacefully demonstrating?
And they are really spoiling the party, because, let's face it, we did have some kind of change that was really championed for the most part by the gallant ladies of Sudan.
Absolutely.
This was something rather new in Africa, and we could have actually politically romanticized it. But unfortunately, it turns out to be more of the same. And then, of course, you do have outside interests.
Saudi Arabia, Egypt,
the United Arab Emirates.
Right.
You also have, of course, Egypt, as you said. These are people that are willing to be on the side of the soldiers, because I think they fear the possibility of Sudan becoming democratic.
Right.
Because
it would threaten their interests.
Are not democratic.
Right.
Yes.
So they're figuring out how to consolidate their interests in the country.
That's right.
And therefore they're willing to ally themselves with the military.
Yeah, and the West is pushing for democracy. They are pushing for a civilian transitional government, really. And in particular, the United States. Actually, the current the U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs, Ambassador Tibor Nage, is expected to arrive in the Sudanese capital this week. He's supposed to be meeting with the Transitional Military Council, along with the civilian, opposition leaders, to sort of figure out a way forward. He's also expected to pay a courtesy call on Ethiopian Prime Minister,
Abiy Ahmed, who's willing to play a mediation role.
Precisely.
Right.
Yeah, to see really whether something can be worked around that. And I think the Sudanese, frankly, should take a cue and borrow a leaf from the process in Ethiopia, rather than perhaps look towards Cairo.
Cairo, exactly. So do you see the African Union move to suspend Sudan as a positive move?
Well, I think it is a positive move, but
they've given them what, 60 days?
Yeah, but it is really simply like talking the talk. The question is, can they in fact go ahead and basically walk that particular talk?
Right.
Because they actually did suspend Egypt.
Currently,
Yeah, the
LCC,
chair.
right.
And right now it's a chair.
Right.
When Morsi, who was probably the only democratically elected president that Egypt probably has actually experienced in its entire history, he was basically overthrown by the military, led by RSC Fatah. And it was suspended for some time. You have to give the AU credit for that because that time the United States of America was not able to sanction those types of changes and democratic changes in Egypt. And it was also something about called politics. You know, politics, as they say sometimes.
Friends and interests.
Yes, and also it's like it's the art of all possibilities. And you're talking about a country that gives billions and billions of aid to Egypt and especially the Egyptian armed forces. And then you are talking about business contracts behind that and what have you.
Do you think Ambassador Tibo Nagy can leverage some of those interests or you know, power that they have or friendship that they have with LCC to kind of ask them to figure out a way to work out the situation in Sudan, given that Egypt is also one of the powers and the countries that has interest in that country?
It's a very tall order because, as you know, when it comes to politics, they are neither permanent adversaries or permanent allies. They are merely permanent interests. And as the interests basically change, alliances also keep shifting, you know, that kind of stuff. I think that Ambassador Tibo Nagy might mean well, but then you also have other players. You're talking about Russia. You're talking about China. For example, at the UN Security Council, they are pretty much on the other side. They don't really want to condemn the soldiers in Khartoum. But at the end of the day, it was going to have to take the people of Sudan again, the Garant Sudanese people, just like the way they were able to put
pressure
on Omar Bashir, put pressure on the Sudanese army to the extent that it was forced, just like the Egyptian army before it, it was forced to abandon Omar Bashir. They can still make it very ungovernable. And the international community...
part of what they're doing right now, they basically decided to desert the streets, close business, close shop.
Yes.
They're staying home.
Yes.
So really, you can't do much as a military.
Yeah. I think the international community should also come in really and probably impose some targeted sanctions, you know, upon some of those people that have power and it's basically misusing it really for their own selfish or institutional interests. Because at the end of the day, what is needed in Sudan, sincerely, is justice.
So speaking of al-Bashir, he had been in power for 3 decades.
Yes.
Al-Bashir is very much symptomatic of a larger issue on the continent, presidents that don't want to leave power. You know, we talk about the Teodoro Obiangs, the Paul Biya,
Teodoro
the
Obiang,
Museveni's.
you're talking about the man of Equatorial Guinea.
Absolutely.
He's been in power, the last time I checked, guess what? Since 1979.
Wow. Basically, people who were born at the time when he was becoming president, when he was starting out his term in office, our grandfathers right now, the man is still the president in one of the poorest countries in the world.
Yes.
So the question is then, as if you were to advise these leaders on the continent that have been in power for a long time, what would you, as an exit strategy, what would you tell them?
I would sincerely appeal to them to find it in their heart to manage their exit. They should have an exit strategy. Because if you don't manage your exit, Jackson,
you end up like Bashir.
Someone else, in fact, is going to have to manage it on your behalf.
Right.
And probably in a manner, in a way that is not necessarily pleasant.
Right.
Because look at Omar Bashir right now. Look at the brother leader.
Right.
The brother leader. A man called Colonel Gaddafi.
Right.
Muammar Gaddafi. You saw how he ended.
Right. Oh, Egypt's president and many
Hosni
others.
Mubarak.
Yeah, Hosni Mubarak and many others who stay in power for such a long time.
Precisely. And yet we have some very, very interesting examples of individuals who had the opportunity to occupy those positions.
Right.
But they were also smart enough to be able to see far and manage the exit. You can look at East Africa, for example. You can look at a man called Daniel Toroitich Arap Moi.
Right.
The man who lives a very good life, very happy life, as an elder statesman
respected.
in Kabalak. Yeah, he has
gives
a
advice.
university.
He's visited by, young President Kenyatta, goes to...
I have been, in fact, one of those few individuals who obviously have been very privileged to have been invited by President Moi as a house,
after he retired.
as a house guest.
Oh.
After he retired, I spent some time with him.
That's interesting.
In Kabalak.
Ah.
We used to have breakfast. We would eat wimbi, this porridge from, wimbi.
The very basic food that we eat, all of us eat.
Oh, yes. He told me great stories. He has a small university college, which I was able to address. And I encouraged the students to be the best that they could be at whatever they choose. And he put me aside and you said, my friend Shaka, you're an incredible man. You said something today that I had never actually heard of.
Well, what did you say?
I simply said, by encouraging, motivating, and inspiring the students, that they should work very, very hard and be the best that they could be.
Yes.
And that they should compete against themselves, not necessarily against others.
You're your biggest obstacle, basically.
Yes.
And so if you have to, and so Moi, we have Kaunda.
We have Kaunda,
we have Jerry
founding
Rawlings.
president of Zambia. He's living a good life. We visited him with.
You have also met him.
Yes.
And
you
went to his house after he retired.
Yes, we actually had a very good television interview with him. He even volunteered, by the way, to play a piano for us.
Yes, I remember that. That was a couple of years ago. Yes.
Then you go
living a really nice life.
Oh, yes.
Peaceful.
And next in Malawi, you have a gentleman by the name Bakili Muluzi.
Yes.
He served his 2 terms, constitutional allowable 2 terms. He went home, presided over a peaceful transition of power from himself to another individual who unfortunately have since died. We're talking about then Professor,
Chiluba.
Not the elder
one.
The elder brother of Professor Peter
Mutarika. Yes.
He was called Bingwa Mutarika.
Bingwa Mutarika. Yes. Chiluba is Zambia. Yes.
And we also, I had the opportunity to visit, Bakiri Muluzi last year in the Malawian commercial capital, Blantyre. He's living a terrific life. He talks about the beauty of serving your people, serving your country.
And then leaving.
Right. And he says there is, in fact, life
after the presidency.
State
so if you're to advise these leaders who are clinging on power, is that look at the others who have left.
Precisely.
Look at the kind of life they're living.
Yeah, look at West Africa. Look at
Jerry Rawlings.
Yeah. Flight, Lieutenant John Jerry Rawlings. Retired from the Ghanaian Air Force, but certainly not tired. He's living a great life.
Yes.
Look at the man that succeeded him, John Kufuor. Look at also the other person, John Dramani Mahama. He was defeated in the democratic election. He conceded defeat with grace, and he still lives his life.
Right.
And in fact, he could even come again and be president.
Now some of these leaders will say, we are worried that our legacy, something that we fought for so many years, will be wiped out when another leader comes in power. And that the argument some have made actually, is that when new leaders come into power, that they spend most of their time trying to wipe away the legacy of the preceding president. And so they're worried that if I don't put my son in power, my seat behind me after I leave, that it won't seem that I was ever president, I was ever leader here.
Yeah, but you see, the thing is really, we are not talking about individual things here. You are a servant of the people. You are a leader. You are supposed to really not be responsible for the vision thing alone. The vision thing that you represent and you reflect should be something that is a reflection of the people concerned.
Right. So what motivates you should not be about your personal interests.
Precisely.
You should be motivated by serving the interests of the people, and then when you need to know when your time has come, you vacate and then actually groom new leaders to come and take over from you.
And hand over the baton, for example, to the next generation. And you know, that is the only thing probably that can actually assure peace and long-term stability of any society. I mean, you have some of the great, leaders that have lived, and we still talk about them. You talk about the Madiba, Nelson Mandela. He only served one term.
So you're basically remembered by how you left power.
Precisely.
So if you left, if you served your time and left, then we remember you, we revere you, we respect you. But if you were pushed out, just like Bashir right now, Glory also we remember you, but in a different way.
That is true.
You're watching Shaka Extra Time. My name is Jackson Vunganyi. I'm here with Shaka Sali. He's answering your questions. We just talked about things that are happening in Sudan, some breaking news about what is going on in the political developments in that country. Shaka, we have some questions that came in online for you from one of, we'll try to answer them in the next couple of minutes before we end our show today. This gentleman, I think his name is Nkemike Uzodima Okeke, said, should governments teach people what freedom means, or is it up to the people to call for freedom?
I think that, first of all, freedom is not something like manna from heaven. Freedom is not easy.
It's not a privilege that is given to you by a leader.
It does not come cheap.
Yeah.
It is something that you either have to demand or actually struggle for. But having said that, if you have a civilized, democratic government in place, it should be able to put in place or create an enabling environment that makes its people feel very free.
Right. Enjoy the freedoms that are granted by your creator.
Precisely.
Right.
Because especially if, in fact, a country is neither a monarchy nor a kingdom, it means, if it is a republic, that you actually have a people that are citizens who owe allegiance to the state or the government, for that matter.
And they get to decide who...
Because in fact, they do have constitutional rights. Constitutional rights can, in fact, reflect what another person might call an inalienable right, or a birthright for that matter. And that everyone is entitled by owning, for example, or by having a right to own an opinion that may in fact be different from the opinion of the ruling party, of the government in power.
And it should be respected, and you should not go to jail because you expressed a different opinion from what the powers that be in the country are.
Precisely.
Because that's your right.
That is your right. You are part of the main stakeholders who are supposed to be, in fact, the ones that are in charge of society and have the power to employ people sometimes who are called presidents, prime ministers, chief justices, ambassadors, and what have you. That those people, in fact, are servants of the people.
Absolutely. We're running short on time, but I needed to put in this question real quick. Gentleman by Yazid Axo says, Shaka, I love watching you, Mr. Shaka. I'm from Uganda, and my question is, what is your political forecast of Uganda come 2021? I believe that's when the next elections are due. President Museveni has been nominated by the ruling party to be their candidate for 2021. The man has been in power since 1986. What is the forecast? What do you think is going to happen?
It's very interesting, again, really. For me, I don't have problems with what I see on the ground because, let's face it, there is a saying that everything has a beginning, middle, and an end tied into each other. Museveni was a remarkable young man in the 1970s and the 1980s. And he was able to mobilize and organize along ideas that the vast majority of society bought into. That is how he was able to seize power in 1986. He's going also to find at some point that his future is actually behind him and that the future is ahead of the changing demographics. The young people.
Uganda is the youngest country in the world.
Yes,
right
and
now.
To tell you the truth, I have confidence in the ability of the young people in tandem with the social media, which helps to expose them and all that kind of stuff.
Let's get in another question.
It will be them.
Absolutely. I guess history will be on the side of the young people.
Oh, yeah, there's no question about it.
Right.
Because nothing, by the way, Jackson, is static. Everything is dynamic.
Absolutely, absolutely. This one is Daniel Osiemo Ondiero Shaka. Most African politicians take politics as a profession. Could this be the reason behind corruption and bad governance?
Actually, they don't probably even take it as a profession, because if they took it as a profession, they would probably try to be good professionals.
Right.
I think that basically what it is that politics gives them an opportunity, for example, if they had grown up poor, if they did not have, for example, property, they do not have assets and what have you, it gives them an opportunity. Power gives them an opportunity to acquire and accumulate that.
Right.
In fact, psychology calls it compensatory consumption. You compensate for what you never had. And psychology, and sociology calls it conspicuous consumption.
Yes.
You build a huge mansion. You buy a huge SUV, Mercedes-Benz, Range Rover, and what have you, and show your people around, can you see me?
Yes.
Here I am.
Yes.
You know, that kind of stuff.
That mentality.
We have to go beyond that. We have to go away from there, get out of that kind of mentality, put yourself in a situation where to serve the institution of the people so that you can help bring about social, economic, political justice for all of us.
Absolutely. Shaka, we have 30 seconds. Let's talk briefly about what is going to be on Straight Talk Africa tomorrow.
Tomorrow we're going to be looking at the African airlines, some of which are succeeding. They are part of a success story like Ethiopian Airlines. And we're going to be looking also
Kenya is actually advancing also in that. Rwanda is doing really well.
Yeah, but Kenya is having problems
fleets.
because its chief executive officer resigned recently, simply because it didn't seem to be working.
Right.
South African Airways also has a lot of problems because it is consistently subsidized by the state and what have you. It has not been able to make profits.
Absolutely.
And so I think these airlines have to be realistic. It's not just about national pride.
That should be a very interesting show, and I hope you guys tune in tomorrow to Shaka Extra Time. The Straight Talk Africa tomorrow. Shaka, thank you very much. This was very interesting, and thanks to all of you who joined us today on Shaka Extra Time. My name is Jackson Vunganyi. Remember to subscribe to the show. Leave questions. Shaka will answer them next week.
And
Shaka, thank you.
And thank you very much for, stepping in while I was away. You and Vincent Macaulay.
Thank you.